Anyway, so for the next 30, 45 minutes, I'll be talking about this. And why is it the best time? And please challenge me, because I really believe it is the best time to be in the business. And leave about 15 minutes for Q&A, and hopefully be able to answer your questions. So why electricity? You know, electricity has been around for more than a century. And maybe in the late 1800s, when Thomas Edison and Tesla, they kind of set up the basic framework of what we're using today, the discovery of electric energy, how it can be transmitted, how it can be used for production. And this graph kind of summarizes the rise of GDP, that is the gross domestic product in the United States, pegged to a constant $2,005 over the last 150 years, and the growth of electricity itself. So, I'm sorry, the growth of personal income. So you can see that as we went forward, the U.S. GDP also kind of advanced, and that advancement had a lot to do with the introduction of electricity, the grid, so that you could transmit electrical power over very long distances. I'm not going to go into the details because you use now what is very common is AC power. But once upon a time, DC was king, and guess what? DC might be king, in the next decade or so, because of all the appliances that use very small amount of power that's very much advantageous to our economy. So just to give you an idea as to how all-encompassing electricity is, in the 1920s, the average per capita use was 0.10 kilowatt. Again, just for those of you who are not familiar, kilo is 1,000 times a watt. So 0.1 kilowatt makes it 100 watts, which is equivalent to an ordinary 100-watt bulb. So you can just visualize, in the 1920s, there was all the electric power that people would use per person, per family. Of course, today, it's up to 3.3 kilowatts, almost a factor of 30 plus above, 1920s. And what do you have then? You have smart machines, there's flat panel TVs, appliances that are also, very stingy, parsimonious as far as use of energy is concerned. So this has kind of really contributed to the growth, economic growth. So electricity and economy, they have been going together, so much so that electricity was dubbed the most important invention of the 20th century by the National Academy of Engineers. Even more important than cars were invented in that same century, or telephone, or telegraph. Those were all invented about the same time. But you can see that electricity just had a very prominent role. So what's happening today? The same advancement that took place in the United States is now being kind of replicated in the rest of the world. You hear about rising economies like China and India. They are also very vast users of electricity, and they're kind of doubling and tripling their generation capacity. In fact, this table shows once upon a time when the United States was the largest consumer and producer of electricity, it's been overtaken by China. And not very close behind, but you can see India is also third in the rank of all the other countries. So electricity use and economy growth are very closely tied. So we want to see advancement in the quality of life around the world, you must equate this with more electrification, whether it's done the way that it's been done in the United States, or whether you have some new ideas that can come forth. All right, so this is a chart that's familiar to my students, but it gives you an overall view of, electricity is not a kind of a basic form of energy that you can pick up as a pool of electricity and you can kind of use it. It's always energy that's converted from one form, like solar, like wind, like nuclear, like coal, like natural gas, you do something to it to create electricity. So just to explain in a very broad way what you're seeing here, what you see are the primary fuels, okay? Starting from yellow solar all the way down to petroleum. And the thickness of the bar or the ribbon indicates kind of quantity of usage. So at the present moment, the amount of solar energy that's used, you can see, is a very thin ribbon, whereas petroleum is fairly thick. So all these forms of energy are utilized to generate electricity, and the end users are these four major consumers. I should say really three: residential, commercial, and industrial. I don't know if your eyes can see it. There's a very thin line that goes here to transportation. And what do you think that is?
Electric cars.
Electric cars, good. Now that's something that could also contribute to a very important issue that the world is facing, and that's greenhouse gas emissions. So if we can cut back on carbon emissions from the use of petroleum in a sufficient manner, and we are nowhere near that with electric cars, you can see this ribbon can start to grow. There's another important part of this whole energy flow is this amount of rejected energy. I mean, it is quite staggering how much of the energy that starts here ends up being rejected or wasted. And there are 2 or 3 reasons for this. One is in the process of generating electricity, there's some traditional losses, okay, in transmission and so on. But more compelling is just physics. We're using fuels to boil water, turn a turbine through coal or natural gas or even nuclear, and the physics kind of militates against efficiencies being very high. Heat, which is being utilized to kind of generate steam to turn a turbine, which is a conventional way of generating electricity, is quite inefficient. So you're losing a lot of that energy just here, and that's a big cause for the rejected energy. So there lies the challenge, what can we do? Because it's rejected energy, the energy that's not used is energy wasted. Usually it is because of carbon-based fuels that you use to create this waste. And so that's the other part that makes it the most important. How do we address greenhouse gas issues without really looking at what are the alternatives to all this energy that is wasted through conventional means? So I think that's another area where you could innovate, and this industry could really benefit from that. So that summarizes what the status is, what the challenges are, and here, if you were to look at just this portion, just saving even 10 percentage points from there could make a big impact. And that's really where the challenge lies as far as greenhouse gas emissions. You've probably heard about COP21 and how much trouble there is in trying to get everybody to agree to cut down on greenhouse gas emissions. Well, one of the reasons is, the developing countries are saying, well, wait a minute, you guys had your chance. Now, we need to develop, and the only way we can develop in a cost-effective manner is using fossil-based fuels. Well, I think solar technology, wind, they're all kind of catching up where in a decade or two, I think we're going to see them on par, if not be even better than, fossil-based fuels, oil and petroleum and gas and so on. So this was yesterday's power system, and when you command and control, you had generating stations that kind of generated the electricity at one end to your left, and then on command it would send electricity, power or energy to its consumers. Could be people, could be industries, it could be commercial houses. And it was a very simple equation. It was the base load generation plus whatever load you had to have load following generation, plus whatever storage you had, and these are just algebraic quantities as far as you're concerned right now, would equal the right-hand side. And the reason is electricity is still not efficiently storable. Once I generate electricity, I've got to use it unless I have a cost-effective way of storing it. You have batteries, they do their job adequately as long as the amount of energy you want to store is minimal, you know, like for your smartphone or for your camera or something like that, but on a very large scale, they're not only expensive, but somewhat inefficient too. So, and there are other reasons behind that. So, electricity is a very perishable quantity. It's not something like you can refrigerate. It's not like something you can store and eat or consume later on. It's just still that when you generate it, you've got to use it. So the old power system was unidirectional. You know, imagine if you're driving along an interstate and I-95 or something where only one-way traffic was allowed. So you went from left to right, and there were no electrons flowing the other way around. But folks, things are changing. And here you have the new world, the world we live in today, in fact, where you have distributed resources like rooftop solar, like wind farms, which are, and microturbines, which are scattered throughout, you know, the grid. It could be something on your rooftop that's not only supplying you energy, but also you're able to sell it back, you know, to the utility, depending upon the local laws and everything else. But nevertheless, what it means is, you know, the types of control that you could exercise before, the unidirectional command and control, cannot be done. You know, the grid now cannot, there's so much intermittency, there's so much variation that you need automation to be able to kind of manage your resource. So in the good old days, you know, it was a person, the grid operator could basically look at what the state of the grid was and say, well, load is going up, and throw a switch to bring in a new generator. And now it's not that simple. It's millions of decisions per second sometimes because of what's called intermittency. Solar, wind that are on the grid are intermittent. And the reason is, what do you think? The sun doesn't always shine, wind doesn't always blow. Whereas a coal plant can run, you know, anytime, 24/7. So that's a problem too, by the way, because something that is not always on when you want it on kind of changes your, you know, requires a change in your habit where when I go turn the switch on, I always want the lights to come on. Well, if you have to settle for intermittency, that's not acceptable. So there's another problem with, you know, renewable energy, is where the intermittency causes a lot of headaches. You've got to not only make sure the intermittency is reduced to a kind of a manageable amount, but also how would you do it? I mean, that's a challenge in itself. So it's not a question of when does this change come? It's the pace of change. What will be the pace of change? And in the US, you know, because we do have state laws and all the federal policy, this change is so dramatic in a place like California or a place like New York. Even Pennsylvania has got a very aggressive, what is called renewable standard. Whereas down the south, there's some states just don't have a renewable portfolio standard. Where I was in North Carolina, we had a very aggressive renewable portfolio standard. And again, so it's the pace of change, how will it change? And this is where you folks are at a very interesting crossroads. So I've already told you how important electricity is, and continues to be. And now you have to work in an environment, in a grid, you know, which is not all that friendly as it was before. You know, before it was, you know, imagine a 2-lane highway that you had, but you knew traffic was going one direction. That meant, well, you knew exactly what was going on because it went one way. Now you have different, thousands of ways the electrons can flow. That makes the problem one of the most difficult to solve today. And it's going to become more and more difficult as we get more and more distributed resources onto the grid. So you have all these three elements that make it the best time. It is the most innovative. You have to come up with new ideas. How do you store electricity? I mean, that's still up for grabs. And it's not just the technologies, but the economics behind it. You want a cheap, economical way of being able to store electricity. how do you solve this most difficult problem in managing the grid? Because you and I are used to having energy, at will, as it were. Reliabilities are very high on the grid that we operate today. And it's also the most difficult, and it's also the most important. As it was for many about tens of decades of years, it's still, as we go forward, electricity is going to become even more important in prosperity and growth, as you can see, as it's being witnessed in many parts of Asia and Africa now. And so the utilities, who are kind of being sanctioned to operate, their companies, are facing a whole bunch of issues here. And, of course, one is the aging generation fleet. You're seeing the plants that are 50, 60 years old are still running. You have environmental regulations. These kind of constrain the amount of greenhouse gases that can be emitted by any plant. And when you have these controls, obviously that means there's a cost element, and that cost element is what the utilities have to pay for. Ultimately, it can be passed on to consumers. Now, how much do you think we are paying on the average per kilowatt hour of energy? Any guesses?
9 cents.
Good. 9? 7? 7 and a fraction? Yeah. So, it is such a small part of your discretionary income that most people don't, I won't say most people, it's much less than your telephone bill, your cell phone bill, not your telephone bill, your cell phone bill. And, here it is, it's such an important commodity. We're used to prices being this low, and really we will militate if the prices were to go higher. So I just described a problem which is so difficult, and you need, obviously, expense to solve this problem. People are going to not accept higher costs as a part of being able to kind of manage the grid of tomorrow or grid of the future. So, again, come back, it is the best time. It is at one time the most innovative. All right, you have new generators on the grid, new materials being used for winds, new materials for solar power, ways to reduce the cost of converting solar electricity to the grid, and that's called a balance of system. And that's always the most challenging, but you'd be surprised now in many states, some of these renewable energies have reached grid parity, that is on par with traditional generators. And you can imagine if electricity, even though it's 7 or 10 cents here, some parts of California is like 30, 40 cents. Some parts of Hawaii is even higher. And so, having solar or wind match, what you have to pay for coal or nuclear is that much easier in these places where electricity rates are pretty high. So it's at one time the most innovative business to be in, because really we need some of the creativity that new minds, fresh minds can bring to this problem. It is the most important, that I keep reiterating, and of course it's the most difficult. They're not simple solutions. You need automation. That's cognitive computing. That's one of the areas where this is very big. The Internet of Things, you've probably heard of that. It's a big, big part of what the utility of the future will need. The human intervention, it will be minimized, but just in a supervisory role will be required. All right, so let's come down to brass tacks, okay? Why am I here telling you this? Well, one of the statistics that is quite startling, but true, has been true for many years, is the underemployment rate. New graduates like you and me many years ago, if you see this red line shows the number of new college graduates who take on jobs that do not require a college degree. All right, let me repeat that. New graduates would take on jobs that do not require a college degree. So you could call that underemployment. I mean, obviously you paid money to go to 4 years of school, and that's like 44%, okay, 44.5. Now, if you look at the age category 22 to 65, there's not just new graduates, but folks who have a bachelor's degree. They too are underemployed at the rate of 34.4%. Well, that's a startling figure. I mean, this is not a knock on education. This is not, by no means is it that. Because, you know, when you go to college, when you go to school, you learn many other things, and social networking is one of them, of course. But also, you know, one of the things my advisor told me was, you know where to find things, okay? You may not be the expert, but you know where to look. But what is, I think the message is, and you could kind of argue with me, the message is now industries, you know, they require interdisciplinary knowledge. You know, they want an electrical engineer to know as much about physics or chemistry or a smattering of just organizational skills, social skills. How do you present things? You know, if I'm an engineer and I'm trapped into talking in a certain way, well, how do I communicate to somebody who's who's got a Bachelor of Arts degree? I mean, it's not straightforward. So I think we need programs similar to what we have here, ESEI. It is an energy-based program. We have 2 or 3 others here in school, which kind of focus on the practical part. That is, after you finish your undergraduate, it's kind of like a boot camp. I'm not gonna say it's easy. It's like a boot camp, you know, where you learn about, you know, what is the industry you're getting into and how's the knowledge you've acquired, you know, in undergraduate, how can it be applied? So yeah, that's the whole theme here. And ESEI, which is the organization that manages, it lives in this ecosystem at Lehigh. I mean, we're not an isolated body, but we're part of the College of Engineering. We have an advisory committee made up of energy company executives and managers who look over what we're doing, because our job is to kind of create the workforce or leaders, you know, in the energy arena. There's an environmental initiative. I think they have a activity going on outside right now. There's an I&E cluster, the Energy Research Center, and the Academic Oversight Committee. So what I'm saying is this does not live in isolation. Our program is not in isolation. It's kind of tempered by everything else that is around Agri. I think would be, you know, part of this ecosystem. And our mission includes all 3. You know, service, research, and education. Education being one of the primary things that you guys will be kind of coming into this program and going out within 10 months in order to be prepared for the energy industry. And the success of what we do depends upon how well you do in your venture. So that's really our marching orders. Service and research, that is, we kind of work with all the ecosystem to make sure that it is, you know, kind of a win-win situation for the entire organization within Lehigh. So, developing partnerships with the energy industry, you know, is part of that. Multidisciplinary energy research, you know, one of the things that we do in the ESEI program is have students participate in projects for 3 or 6 credits. And this would be working within industry which has the actual problem. And what would be the upshot? Here, you'd find out that project success means not only using your native knowledge, but working together as a team, perhaps exploiting knowledge that you may not have, but may kind of be derived from what is being studied. You know, what are the end goals of the project itself. So it's kind of a discovery, but not a science project, because it's got a very clear goals of what needs to be done. And the ESEI program itself, as I said, is a robust and a practical 10-month curriculum spread over fall, spring, and summer. All right, so that's our vision: develop world-class technical leaders for the energy industry. That's a vision we have, that, it's on par with the best of schools. We think about Wharton, we think about business, and our vision is to have, when the energy industry thinks about Lehigh's ESEI program or the energy program, it's where they want to pick the graduates. That vision is ambitious, but it's not easy. It's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take time. It's going to take a lot of working at it. The energy network of today, is the usual gang of suspects. You have the U.S. Department of Energy, Con Edison, these are the surrounding utilities that work in this area. But tomorrow's, and actually it's happening today, you have a whole bunch of players. You have the banks. Why are they interested in energy, you think? Capital, okay? And they also have facilities that consume a lot of energy. So if any way you can make a dent in their energy use, they're obviously, their stakeholders and their stockholders would be happy. You also have a bunch of equity firms. Talent Energy, which was part of PP&L, is really run by, it's really a private equity firm, which was, they were former employees of PP&L that took over. This kind of deregulation is going on in the industry, especially of the generation assets. So it is changing. It is not the same world as it was before. And you have companies like McKinsey, Deloitte. By the way, there's a career fair tomorrow, and please don't miss it because you have a lot of these major companies that will be there. So the energy network of tomorrow is much more diverse and dispersed. It's not your grandfather's energy network anymore. It is truly widespread. All right. How many of you heard of David Letterman? Okay. All the young guys haven't heard it. Well, he had this top 10 list, and he had stupid pet tricks. I'm going to go through one of the top 10 features. And by the way, this is just to keep this lighthearted note. The top 10 wow factors of Lehigh University's ESEI program. Let's see. Number 10, energy today, the most important driver for development of a sustainable world. Number 9, it's the most difficult problem to solve. Number 8, it's the most innovative time to be in energy. And, wow. Okay, number 7, advances in clean technology have a direct impact on greenhouse gas emission reduction. And this is an all-encompassing problem that the whole world needs to address. We are seeing evidence of what some of the precursors are, the flooding, more intense storms. These aren't, they may sound anecdotal or kind of spot variations, but really they have proven there's been a steady rise in temperatures. In fact, the New York Times had a very interesting article. Over the last 100 years, ocean temperatures, ocean is a big heat sink that has been absorbing the heat, excess heat, in such almost a tragic manner. The entire ocean, everywhere across the globe, it's warmer by 1 or 2 degrees. So that's quite a sobering message there. More than 1 billion in the world do not have access to electricity. So you can imagine now you have these people who know there's innovation taking place. Villages in Ghana and some remote parts of Africa and Southeast Asia. Electricity means a kid can be studying at night. What a treat it is. I really mean this sincerely. Because they're able to study at night, they can educate themselves and go further. And you can imagine millions of people having this liberty. Electrification has been and will be the path to prosperity. We cannot change this unless there's a total new form of energy, which we don't see anything in the very near future. And coming to the curriculum, it's a practical curriculum. You learn things that are relevant to the industry. 30-credit, 10-month program. Check in and check out. And we are measured by how successful you are in in where you go. And of course, we want to have constant contact with you folks because your experience will grow this program. And we have a pretty healthy list of alumni, almost 200 plus people, who are going to be part of this ecosystem as we go forward. And Wendy has done a great job of collecting all this information. You'll see their experience on our up-and-coming website. Donna has been very influential in getting this website going. So stay tuned, mid-October you'll see it. Presentation and writing skills are emphasized. So, there's one thing that, I call myself a reformed engineer because, engineers sometimes fail to convey, what is the issue. One could argue that engineers probably somehow did not anticipate what this global problem, this greenhouse gas emissions. I think we underplayed it, but it's all in retrospect. I'm looking back. It's just that the issue was, we're just not good at communicating. I say that bluntly. I think the better we are to be able to convey at different levels, to your boss, who may be an art historian, but he's running the show. You need to convince him or her. Or your neighbor, Joe Lowe, he's a plumber, and he comes to Lewis and says, hey, Lewis, what the heck is this nuclear plant in my backyard they're thinking of building? Because you have this kind of monolithic image of what these things mean, they're stereotypical. The ESEI vision is to develop world-class leaders in energy, and that takes, not just, the curriculum, but obviously students who kind of make this up. It's not in the program. And, with the drum roll, this is my sense of humor. It's neither easy nor easy. Well, this is like a boot camp. It is tough. I don't want to kind of, say that, well, you can skate through this. No, you cannot. But I really thank you for your attention, and hope some of you are thinking about the next step, that you think of the energy program here at Lehigh as a credible, and energy especially, the field of energy as a way to go forward. But I'll be happy to answer any questions. I think we got, 20 minutes, just as I planned. So thanks a lot.